We'd really like to, well, thank you to everyone for coming through today. And thank you very much, Christelle, for making yourself available. And we're looking forward to a brilliant presentation. Christelle's had a huge amount of experience. Still a lot younger than I am, I see. He only started working in 1991. But really from Marsh, I've known Christelle from Marsh for many years, but also science and technology, worked at Sasol, worked at post office, and really across a whole broad range, from ethics to business continuity to risk management to company secretary. So really a huge amount of experience. And I think we're really looking forward to your presentation today with the experience that you've got. And thank you for being with us today. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Jono, for that introduction. I think just as a starting point, so that you understand where I'm positioning ourselves today, is I think risk managers face the challenge that they are told every day what other people should do with their information. And if those people don't do that with that information, then you failed. Okay, and I think that for us is probably the biggest challenge. And I want to share with you today what I think the challenge from a director's perspective is. So when he gets your information, what must he do with it? And how can you do something that will make his life easier so that you actually get more buy-in into the process? Does that make sense? Okay, so let's start off. We'll look at a day in the life of a director. It's not really a day, it's usually like a week every 3 months, and then you work yourself to death, and then you come back and relax for the next 2 months. And what we can do to make their lives easier, what should we add to our process? And then I think the most important decision-making tool in risk management, what do you think that is? The one thing in the risk management process that a director needs to make your process work is your risk appetite statement. Okay? And then combined assurance, what do the director want to see out of combined assurance? And then what should you then be? And what skills should you make yourself strong in, and how should you enable yourself to be able to deliver that? And it's not only theoretical knowledge, it's unfortunately a bit more than that. There's a few other skills in there that I think we need to make ourselves strong in. Okay, good. So that's all a director needs to do. And sorry, this slide, I know it's extremely busy, but I did that on purpose to give you a perspective on what this guy faces. So directors only have 4 primary duties in terms of the Act and in terms of King. They must steer and set strategic direction. So in other words, you management write your plan, you go to them, they nod, they think it's perfect, or not, they send you back 20 times. And they must then manage you in terms of that. They then approve policy and planning, so how do we execute that? They oversee and monitor, make sure you keep on the right track. And they ensure accountability, which I think in South Africa we may have lost sight of slightly. Okay. Can I ask, who's in the public sector, who's in the private sector? Public? Private, obviously the rest. Small, medium enterprises? NGOs, NPOs? Okay, so just keep in mind that when I chat about stuff, I'm going to try and give reference to those different groupings, because the rules are not always the same for all of us. Okay, so now, and I'm sorry, this is very small here, all the director has to do when he executes those 4 things is to get to the King 4 outcome. So you must get them to be ethical. I'm the director, you're the company, I must make sure you are ethical. I must make sure you are legitimate in the society in which you operate. They want you there. So today, if you are Sasol and you just spilled all your stuff into the Vaal River, you may not be that legitimate. Okay? You must make sure they still make money or perform or deliver on the social mandate. So if you're in the public space, can you deliver on the social mandate? And then you must have proper control so that we don't have Bosasa and all of that. Okay, so this seems pretty easy so far. And to make a director's life even more easy, there's just the King 4 principles. So now we give you a textbook. Here's your book, go and do Go and oversee companies like that. And all you have to do when you execute the 17 King 4 principles is you must just make sure that you keep in mind the 3 fundamental shifts globally. What is that? We're not going to only report on financial capital anymore. We're going to think of long-term capitals, the 6 capitals, human capital, natural capital, all of that. Are you all aware of the 6 capitals? Not shake your head, do something. And report inclusively and think about your sustainability reality. But you think you're just the risk manager still, right? Okay. While you're doing that as the director, think about people, planet, and prosperity, the triple context. And also think about the 6 capitals that we've mentioned. And if that is not enough, also please think about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And between 2 and 3 on a Sunday morning, just consider the 5 CRISA principles. Okay, so this is what this guy faces. He must now contextualize that, often in the context of a multinational company operating across borders, where this whole framework may be different. So if you're a South African company and you work in Africa, because of the way the African history is working, you can deal with a Muslim legal code. You can have issues around Sharia law. You can do with Francophone countries where you'll have the Napoleonic Code. You'll have British law. You can have Roman Dutch law. You have to now figure out how this stuff works there. And still be friendly to those guys and make sure they don't think you're totally ineffective and demanding and just making their lives uneasy. So, if you're now a director and we feel you don't do that, all we're going to do is we're going to hold you accountable for misconduct. So legally, this is what can happen to you. If you start there at the top, we can just say to you, we don't like what you're doing, please just go. And the Companies Act tells you under which circumstances we will ask you to leave. Okay. Or we can say, we will sue you. Us, who you are working for and doing all of that, don't like what you're doing, so now we'll sue you. Or we can say, we won't back you if somebody else wants to sue you. So the Central case in Australia, for instance, is a good example, where the company was not a going concern for a few years. The directors colluded, you can Google it, and this one guy was an engineer on the board, and he said, well, I'm not there for my financial skills, I was just there for my engineering knowledge. And the court said to him, well, not only are you now an incompetent director, you also lied and keep the shareholders under a misperception because as a board, collectively, you are accountable. So the problem with a director is you need to make sure everybody else also do what they want to do. Or we can say, okay, despite all of this, we just want you to be registered as a delinquent director. So if you go on to the CIPC's website, the Company and Intellectual Property, we'll list you there so everybody can see that you can't do your job. Okay. And lastly, if nothing else works, we'll throw you in jail, like the mine water drainage acid case that we saw. Okay. The lucky thing is for all of this, you can probably get directors and officers insurance. And you can ask your company to pay that insurance for you. Obviously, when you start getting criminal, there's some limitations on that. But what you can't get insurance for is the rest. Okay, so I think there's some people there that have a slight problem. Okay, so does that make your life, it gives you an idea why these people look like this? It's not a cool job. And to be honest with you, if you go look at the National Treasury's published rates, you get 3,800, I think, rand per day to do that and avoid that. That's less than we pay a lot of our junior people. So this is really about making, from a risk management perspective, these people's lives as easy as you can possibly make it. Okay. not only will you then make their lives easier, but you will get that, what IRMSA now calls the hashtag impact, a year of risk activism. That Praveen Gordon don't come to our next annual conference in 2019 and say, why did you miss state capture? My response immediately is, well, maybe not all of us missed it. Maybe some of us actually said something and nobody listened. That often happens with a risk manager. I think our challenge is the way in which we say it and the way in which we get our message across. Okay. I remember once I was a risk manager at a company, and at the audit committee, the chairperson asked the MD, you have a good risk management process, are you aware of it? And my first reaction was, I've got a good process. And then I thought, but it's my failure that these people aren't using it as they should. So I have to go and do some introspection and think about, okay, now how do I change my messaging here? So you have to try and get people to trust you while you're exposing them in a responsible way and help them to close the gap. Okay. So it's about relationship. I think if there's one skill that risk managers should, and everybody should train on that, it's that soft skill about making people trust you and standing like this between a director and a company and keeping everybody together. Okay. So now the rest of us have to help. Who's been to IRMSA's Risk Labs last year? You would have seen this picture in a bit of a different guise. So the risk manager and the auditors and the compliance officers and quality inspectors, we feel like, flip, what more do we need to do? This guy wants to kill himself by now because he's getting all of these things and they are not coordinated, they're not integrated. We've once had a company where I worked and the compliance officer, we both rated the same risk in the same board pack, 2 different ratings. Frantically, after the packs have been, we worked together, we're going to now table something at the meeting to do damage control, and we basically didn't sleep for a week. Nobody picked it up. Not one director picked it up. So what does it tell me is the guys don't get to work through all that detail. So one tip, the first tip I think you must really think about is what you put in that pack. Is it really necessary for the director to do the 4 things that he must do? Or are you putting it in there to cover your own behind so that you can say, but I did tell you? The fact of the matter is, by the time something does go wrong, nobody's going to remember you put it in there. And it was maybe on page 74 of Annexure 205. Okay. The director looks like that. Just calm down, people. It's not that bad. That's how he feels. He may look, because they are trained to look very calm and demure and everything, but that's not what they feel like. And then this guy just smiles to the bank all the time. So can I ask who's most powerful in this? Hands up for risk managers. Executives. You don't say. Executives. Directors. Who's a member of a pension fund? Or a medical aid? Most of us. Who of you that belongs to them go to an AGM? Who complains when it didn't grow like it should have? So you are driving them for short-term gains. And if we make them responsible to make them do the right stuff, nobody's going to listen to him. So just understand, as a risk manager or an assurance provider, somehow your messaging has to come through right to the end. And I would still want to see people even just bridging that divide. It's very difficult. Okay, good. So the director's story starts at sustainability reality. There's a world out there. We need to make money in this world. What do we do to make money? We create a strategy, right? So for you, our topic this morning is not risk management, it's risk governance. As a risk manager, you need to understand this whole story to understand where risk governance fails. You're not only doing the 7 steps in ISO, okay? Whether we like it or not, there's a risk-bearing capacity, risk appetite, risk tolerance, which I would call a risk appetite framework. And that exists in the company whether you've defined it or not, because everybody knows when you will be fired. Do that and you're out the door. That's your risk appetite. Do this and we'll discipline you for having gone outside of your delegation of authority. So if your risk appetite is not aligned with things like your board charter, your delegation of authority, the responsibilities we give people in their performance agreements, risk governance fails. Okay? Nothing else happens in this company except they're operating. They have a good combined assurance program. So the directors now have a way of seeing whether the stuff we do here will make us successful in the world that we live in. And all they then do as a governing body, whether it's now in different committees, audit committee, risk committee, social and ethics committee, they get assurance that things are working and they can report honestly, transparently about that. This is the ideal world, right? In the real world, that gap exists. And that's why we have all of that. So cost-wise, if you think about insurance, for insurance companies, the cost of this is 25% of their profit. I don't even know that many other companies can calculate that. And if these groupings, this bunch of people don't collaborate, we're making it worse in all of those unmeasurable costs that we can't, because now I'm having a fight with a compliance guy because he wants his methodology and I want mine, and now we're going to do 2 reports. It's things like that that makes directors say, but why do I need risk manager? At least with compliance, somebody's going to find me or revoke my license. On risk management, you know what, I can just as well not deal with that. Okay. So our challenge is to understand 2 things. How do you work with this? And the second thing is, are you anchored there and are you anchored there? If you are not, if your processes aren't aligned, if you are not talking to those people, you're going to be a tick box exercise before the board meeting. And don't blame anybody else. Clear? Good. So remember we said, and I'm using this as an example, you can use this same principle for CRISA. We said, while the director now sees your report, he gets your risk management report and you have a nice little matrix there with the top 10 risks and what we're doing about it. He's thinking in the back of his mind, but how are we dealing with the sustainability development goals? If you don't even mention it anywhere, he's going to do it on the back of his cigarette pack. I think nowadays when people smoke less, it's on another piece of paper, but he has to try and figure it out from your report. And the audit guy's report, and the compliance guy's report, and the IT steering committee's report, and everybody that wants to say anything. So let's just think, I've taken from each one of these some examples of how you can use this to go and look for risks in the organization or how to develop controls. And some of the examples I'll put up there. If you see the logo, some of it will be good and some of it will be bad. Okay. So, on the sustainable goal of eradicating poverty globally, the organization and you in your risk report had to figure out of the risks that you have, which makes that worse or better, and of your controls, which make that worse or better. So if you think of Sasol, I'm not going to use the Vaal River pollution example. For instance, when I was still working there, we had somebody that just raised a concern and said, you are, in terms of safety, extremely strong, right? And we understand that you want to keep us safe. But when you tell me every 6 months to bring back my safety boot so it can be destroyed, I am conflicted because my child goes to school without shoes. So from a poverty and eradication of poverty perspective, we then said, we can't give you those unsafe safety boots, but we will sell it to a company that can recycle some of that material, and from the proceeds of that, we'll provide school shoes to the community. And if you know an organization make a difference, it's now an independent NPO, but that started in Sasol of colleagues then saying, okay, we'll contribute to this. We think this is cool. And it became an independent NPO. So the reach now becomes much bigger. It's now not only Sasol, it's now different communities across South Africa. So it's things like that that you need to think about. It's also about thinking of your reach wider than just your entity. Because the director sits there and wonders about this. And all he sees is your internal controls and your internal focus on your risk. Go very quickly across the rest. On Eskom, I think we all know the stories, but one of the things that for me is quite key, while we were building coal-fired power stations for our own ways and means, we are now training and educating people on technologies that's outdated. So by the time we wake up, they cannot go work anywhere else, because we are now making them redundant in the job market. So think about those things when we think about hunger and all of the implications that go with that. Next one, you all know of the collective class action of the mining guys that Richard Spoor was driving. So a lot of people got sick in the mining space. So when we talk of good health, the mining companies just every time said, oh well, part of the job. Nobody even challenged it in the beginning. By the time Richard Spoor made the case global and known, Harmony Gold took the lead. And they went to the other big mining houses in the case and said, let's settle with these people. It's our responsibility. So the risk may never even have been on the risk register, because by the time the risk manager learned of this or thought about this, it was already gone. It was just, yes, there's a big case and it belongs to legal. Good. Quality education. We think always this is at primary school level, and I think there is a big gap at that starting level of education, secondary, tertiary education, etc., etc. FA News is a company that runs the Insurance Apprentice. And they take, it's almost like Donald Trump, you fired, and they have a guy that looks very much intimidating, and then behind the back he makes friends with everybody. But they have a program where they take young learners and graduates in the insurance industry across competitors and across regulators, and they train them and they make them visible as the new leaders. So I think as a risk manager, how do you work that into your HR risk profile, your people whose risk register don't have the risk of skills, retention, talent management? All of us have that. So what does the control say? Or is it sitting there in the CSI or the marketing department, this type of initiative? Do you know whose logo this is? I took the name out because it was too big. Yeah, I think you're saying the right thing. Imperial. Gender equality, you know what happened there? When the CEO had to resign because he called the legal advisor a employment equity appointment. And she decided, I'm not taking this lying down. So understand the biases in your company and be brave enough to say those things on the risk register. Sometimes when you get to the first stage of trying to do this and you populate the causes fields in your risk management system, it's like a laundry list. People just complain. But take the information and start processing it into information that can give you this sort of message. So you can pick it up and deal with it. And go to the guy and say, listen, people don't like what you say. Okay. Workplace hygiene and waste disposal. It's not that I work for the post office. The CEO actually said it the other day publicly. They take their own toilet paper to work because the company can't provide. I think that is just deplorable. So when we think clean water, you think about somebody polluting the Vaal River, but what's happening in your office? How do we start here where we're working and how we do? So if those sort of things exist, especially in the public sector, people seem to accept, oh, you know what, there's nothing we can do about this. Let's just walk around the dripping water in the basement. But think about this. It starts here. Charity starts at home. And this is not even charity. This is just basic rights. Renewables. This is a company called Solar Capital. What's so great is that while in Sasol, a lot of people already saw that we need to think about beyond fossil fuels and beyond the way we are creating fuel nowadays. And when they left, they created a company called Solar Capital. The CFO actually is now their CFO, the ex-Sasol CFO. And they have like farms in the Karoo under solar panels and wind farms. And so link this in terms of how your process efficiencies work. So do you have solar geysers on your roof in the company? Do you promote programs like that to your employees? This is a very old example. The company still exists. So the sustainable goal here is good jobs and economic growth. So who's under 35? There's a few. You look 20, so you So anybody trying to, I think now it's already 37, but a few years ago it was 35. Anybody trying to talk to those people, if you're not 35, you're talking two different languages. So I don't want to hear what you want me to do. I want to hear what you want to get out of it, and I'll go make it happen, come whichever way. So we need to understand in this company, it's Semco Partners. It was a small little privately owned company. It's the only one, I think. No, there's another one that's not South African. Owned a small little family business, run according to the strict rules. It was in Brazil. And when the son took over from the father, he said, what nonsense is this? I'm going to ask all the employees how long do they want to work. If you said half an hour a day, you get paid for half an hour a day. If you said 16 hours a day, no, sorry, that's in contravention of labour law, you can do 12. And he set up the pay systems and everything like that. If your job was work from home, then you work from home. I don't care. Come performance evaluation, I'm going to fire you if you didn't. And I think a lot of the time our problem is we don't want to have the difficult discussions. We don't want to look people in the eye and say, you didn't perform. Or you know what, I made it difficult for you to perform. And have those discussions. This is, I'm a bit biased towards this entity. It's the Department of Science and Technology. This is about innovation and infrastructure development as a sustainable development goal. Now in South Africa, we may not like SANRAL, but at least some of our highways look better than it did before. Maybe we paid 3 times for it, but it looks better. So in terms of the Department of Science and Technology, what I like about what they're starting to do is when the white paper was defined, and a lot of government departments do this, and I think even SOEs, instead of pushing back to Parliament and pushing back to your executive authority, the minister, you just accept everything that they say. And what these guys did is they said, let's risk assess the white paper before it's published. Because this is going to be our strategy until one day Parliament dreams up a new white paper. And I think that pushes the boundaries, and in there's a lot of stuff about new technologies that will give us different ways of mobility, getting somewhere, printing stuff, building stuff, manufacturing stuff. It's about innovation. If you take all the controls in your risk register and you just searched for the word innovation or create something new or put something new in place, how much do you get? So for all of what we've spoken about so far, if you go look at the risks, if you look at the consequences and the controls, even the causes, how does it link to this? Can you get that info today? I know Jonathan creates custom fields for clients, so maybe there should be a field to link it to this or to the outcomes or something. What I think is deplorable is that people get stuck on something like ISO or COSO, and then you'll have a field which say, pick if you're going to treat, tolerate, transfer, or terminate this risk. If you replace that field with this one, would you get better value? What do you do if you say transfer? Do you now go to the CFO and say, did we buy insurance? You should, if that's what you picked. Good. Reduced inequalities. I've put SATU there because I think they are just beyond comprehension. You can ask for more money for a few thousand people. There's a few million who don't have. So we need to think about things holistically and not here and short-sighted. So think about remuneration policies, entitlement mentality, the way that we set up our labor practices and labor action and demands. How do we deal with people? Do we rather make them part of our solution, if you can? And how do you get that done? Sustainable cities and communities. What I love about, I think it's Sanlam and Nedbank. They are saying we are moving our CSI spend out of marketing or PR or wherever it's sitting, and we put it in sustainability. Because if we don't develop the rural areas and make it possible and develop people to be able to write business cases, to ask for credit, to develop their businesses, we won't have people to sell our services to. So then it becomes easier for a risk manager to say, okay, let me now go back to the sustainability reality. How does my strategy address that? Is it within my risk appetite, and how do I build my controls? Responsible consumption. I go to the Kruger Park, anybody that sees me on Facebook, at least 5 times a year. But what they've done is if you walk in their shops, they've got a big thing on the ground and everywhere on the road, purchase with purpose. So don't just buy because your child wants the 3rd ice cream today and now he's going to chuck it outside the floor. Buy because you know that you are buying responsibly. When we sell our products, what do we sell for? The latest flavor of ice cream or something that is maybe a bit more sustainable? I just listened this morning about, again, the 100th time, the discussion around plastic pollution. So now we've gone full circle. We've gone from plastic straws to paper straws, which dissolved halfway through the cold drink, to pasta straws, which is a spaghetti by the time you're done, and back to recycled plastic. Now, I heard the other day that half of what says recycled is not even recycled. So I don't know, as humans, why can't we just sip out of the cup? I don't know. Protecting the planet? Do I need to say anything about these people? We all know what happened there. What astounded me was by the time there was reaction, $35 billion of value was destroyed in that company. What did that do to those people's pension fund? I don't even want to know. Shareholders, all of those, $35 billion. Life below water, blue economy enablers. There was an article, now I can't remember. It was a hospital or a medical facility in Cape Town that was pumping chemicals out into the water, and the argument was it's diluted by so much that it doesn't matter, it's not so bad. Until somebody started testing the content in fish, I&J and these people and they started picking those things up there. So the issue about the blue economy is also, as a risk manager, understand your whole supply chain, right? If you are selling stuff or sourcing stuff, everybody thinks about responsible sourcing. But if you are selling stuff that can't be disposed of properly, the whole value chain and the cradle to grave concept, you need to think in your risk register. When people are saying, like what we all do, we must attain this objective, but because this can happen, this is the risk, so therefore we're going to know. And the risk is we may not achieve the profit margin. But maybe the profit margin pushes you to do something irresponsible. So we need to think about how that works in the risk register. Life on land, opportunity management and bio-friendly processes. People like SAPI and the NAMPACs of the world has got such a great opportunity to promote those sort of things. And I'm sure if we all go look in our companies, what they are that we can demonstrate any of these goals through the risk register that the director didn't know before about your company. I must tell you, I'm sitting on 1 or 2 boards, and I find more stuff in the news than sometimes what's in the board packs. And it's because what comes to me is packaged for a different audience. So when we do this sort of thing, I don't want to read in the newspaper that the CEO of SAPI announced that they are contributing so much to oxygen creation through their forests or whatever. I want to see it in my report, and I want to know more detail about it. That picture is about blood diamonds, so think about your supply chain. I think what's a problem there, so peace and justice is what we're talking about. What's a problem there is there's conflicting demands. So if you are dying of hunger, what are you going to do? And is that always ethical? So as a big corporate, how do we, coming back to where we started, eradicate poverty and hunger so that the supply chain becomes, so these things are all interconnected as well. And then again, science and technology, because I like them. Partnerships for goals. What I like about them is also the government employee medical scheme that's doing this. And a while ago, the Department of Public Enterprise did a similar thing. Is figure out a risk management framework so that you can manage the entities through which you must deliver. Okay, so government employee medical scheme, for instance, they do their business, it's an outsourced business model, through a bunch of administrators, and you've got Universal and Metropolitan and all of those guys in there. And they say, but we want to understand your risk to us. And they have a formal process. The Science and Technology has got the CSIR, the Research Foundation, HSRSC, all of those guys. And they say, let's get together and see how we deal with this. So this is an example. If you don't do this, the director has to guess. Okay. So, if you remember one slide, please remember this one. We understand risk appetite, I think, as risk managers, more or less. We understand risk management and we get sort of combined assurance. Okay. We need to make ourselves strong there and there. Not in the content. And when I go to the next slide, I want you to this bit. It's about the breakdown there between each of these things. That's where you need to focus on. So you need to figure out from sustainability to strategy, and I've put some questions there that you can ask yourself or tips that you can say. So for instance, if you think about sustainability reality, assess to see if the strategy addresses sustainability risks and pursues the right opportunities to enhance sustainability. Now, depending on what business you are in, this is going to be a different time frame. If you're in the energy space, it's going to be a 2050 strategy. If it's in the fast-moving consumer goods space, it's maybe going to be a year strategy. So when people ask you in the risk workshop, okay, what year are we, what time frame are we talking in? You say as long as it takes. Because some things take years to develop and some things you can fix in a month. You don't say, we only think till the end of that financial year. Identify, so in strategy, your risk governance question should be, identify and assess risks stemming from the strategy. So what if you get it right? So you plan to do something, it happens. The director sits there and nips and he thinks, oh my soul, they didn't think of this. So you as the risk manager has to go to them and say, you can't do that, or let's phrase it like that, or let's change the process like that. Identify and assess the risks to the strategy, that we all do. So we must achieve this, but these are the risks that we all do. So emerging risks and disruptors, who has got in their risk framework? And if you put your hand up, I will come and learn from you. Who has got in their risk frameworks a formal emerging risk methodology? So if I'm sitting on the board, I must think of your emerging risks. I've got one entity every quarter. We have assessed that there's no emerging risks. Like, how? How did you do that if there's no I imagine Steiner's board sitting there. There's no emerging risks. Oh, sorry. Risk appetite. Now here is a tip, and we'll go into a little bit of risk appetite. Am I running behind schedule? Who has gone to look at the MOI? Firstly, if you can get it out of somebody. The board charter where it says something what the board must do about risk. The audit committee, the three committees, the audit committee, the social and ethics committee, and the risk committee's charters. So the first two, the audit and the social and ethics committees, are statutory committees. Every company must have them. Somebody will put the risk in either one or have them separate, doesn't matter. But if those charters, the statutory obligations for risk, are not aligned with what you put in your risk committee's charters, you've had a failure in risk governance right there. Include the 6 capitals in the triple context. I'll show you quickly how to put the 6 capitals in your risk appetite. And include risk-related decisions. We touched on this on our delegation of authority. Okay. Risk governance, I'm not going to touch here. We know pretty much how these work. On combined assurance, I just want to emphasize, try and get one point of interpretation and one point of reporting. Because if 3 people look at the same risk and create a different discussion around this risk, you're just confusing me at board level. Okay. Risk governance, ensure your reporting address everything that's in the TOR. And if the TOR asks for the wrong thing, advise the committee about it. Tell the committee, we think you should be looking about this, that, and the other. There's a good process, it's actually a company secretarial process, but that I find helps a lot, is you write your report and you have at the last, you have request. We're asking the committee to approve this, note that, discuss that. When you do your minutes, you say whether they approved that, noted that, and discussed that. Okay, because often the report comes to the board and they're like, okay, yeah, now what do you want me to do? Okay, I nod my head, yes, it looks fine. So tell me what you want and make sure that you give me what you want me to do. Okay. And then on integrated reporting, who actually gets to see the draft integrated report before it gets published? Nobody. So by the time it's out there, it's too late. You need to make sure that you've risk assessed that, as S&T did the white paper. Assess the thing before it goes out, because you have to cover this whole value chain. So that's risk governance. Now you're thinking, okay, I had to set the context, identify the risk, assess the risk, mitigate, monitor and report and go back again. That is sitting there. You haven't looked at any of this. Good. This we can go very quickly. We've covered most of it. This is an example of a risk universe. So traditionally we look there. What is our risk in operations and processes? And you get all the different functions and operations there. Think about strategy. Think about those things and what happens in the organization and where the risks in there. This is a medical space. So they've got that sort of thing, and I left it in there so you can see as an example how deep you go into it. If there was an NHI debate, it would have had to sit somewhere there if you're in the medical space, if you're discovery. Okay, so you need to bring those things in, because the director reads in the newspaper and he hears the minister making the announcement and he gets your report and there's nothing. Who's seen this picture before? No, I'm asking because I use it quite a lot. Nobody. Okay, so this is the Titanic. We know this guy was the one running around trying to make everybody understand there's an iceberg in the way. This guy was like very frantic, but he couldn't stand up to that guy, and this one was scared of that one. Okay, so who are they? That was JP Morgan. He wasn't in the movie, but that's really him. So they're your shareholders, and in government, understand who it is. So when I say MOI, I could just as well say whatever it is that's in your APP. Okay? And your shareholder would be your minister. But maybe it's not the minister, maybe it's the voting constituency that he plays for. Okay? Or maybe he plays for himself. There's the directors, management, and employees that must make stuff work. Now, why I'm explaining this to you, this is the starting point of your risk appetite framework. If you don't have this right, you're going to come up with a number, then you're going to say to people, this is our risk appetite, and they're not going to know what you're talking about. Okay? Their role is to make sure the money that they've given is used for the right purpose. Their role is to know, like we've said, the 4 duties, but to make sure the strategy gets executed so that purpose is achieved. So if you're the Titanic, we want to create a ship that goes fastest route from Southampton to New York and come hello high water, that's what we're going to do. So you make it happen. This CEO gets just whacked from the top. That's why he's like killing himself by now. Okay? And this guy says, oh, sorry, the thing can't sail if it's got a hole in the hull. Okay. So where do you find that? MOI, board charter, performance contracts, we've covered that. You're clear on where that information sits. So if this captain said, yes, the ship can still sail, but we just need to go a few degrees south because there's no more icebergs, and this thing says, no, thou shalt, then you need to tell them that it can't exist if we do that. We're going to die. So, risk-bearing capacity, risk tolerance, risk appetite, and delegation of authority. The bottom guy, they don't understand anything about risk appetite, must have something that will tell him this is what you can do. So whether you put it in policies and procedures, standard operating procedures, performance agreements, it's fine. Just put it somewhere where the guy can see what he must do. So he stands up, he says, sorry, people, I can't do this. Goes to management, management says, yes, okay, the board did give me some leeway, we can go a bit south. Inside risk appetite, let's all happily carry on. This guy says, sorry, I'm going to have to go ask the directors. They were very firm on what we're allowed to do. Go to the director, now you're outside your risk appetite. You've breached risk appetite. The moment you go to the board and say, I need help, you've breached risk appetite. If you go to board with every little thing, you are pulling them down into your operations. You should not do that. You need to be able to understand what the strategy wants, and you are accountable for that. The moment something happens that says, I can't execute strategy, you go to the board, you've now breached your risk appetite. Okay. Now the board says to you, you've bring me such a problem, I don't know what to do about this, I'm going to have to go ask the shareholder. What happened now? I've breached risk tolerance. I'm going there now. So the moment you are SAA and you ask for the next 500 billion bucks, it means these people might now at some point say, sorry, the money is up. Because we also gave to Eskom and Transnet and Topo and I don't know who else. So the moment that the shareholder says, sorry, we're selling, we're taking our money, we're done. The moment the DA comes to power, that's what has happened to the ANC. You've reached your risk-bearing capacity. Okay. Now taking that and putting it into that little block that we all know, the risk. Who uses a risk matrix to report? Most of us. So taking this information and putting it into a block, here's the most basic of blocks you can find, of matrices. So there's your likelihood, there's your impact, the way we use it. There's green, there's red. I made it pink because some companies didn't like red. It's apparently very intimidating. Yellow and yellow. So if it's going to happen, but it's not so bad, we can deal with it. Managers and executives will figure it out. We're in risk appetite. Same on this side, but on this side it can be big enough once off to wipe us. So we say for those bad things we're going to ask directors. Here, if there's 500 Rand cash shortage 20 a month and it happens every month, let's just provide for it on the budget, we'll figure it out and we'll discipline people. If it happens here, sorry, now we need to get shareholders involved. You want us to go past the North Pole, there's going to be icebergs, so let's figure it out. Now translating this into the one, some companies having a 10 by 10 matrix, is just a question of building the different lines in, and on impact level, looking at the 6 capitals, right? So, whoops, here you've got that same, and in this company, if this line goes like this, so it's more green, you are more pro-risk. If the line goes like that, so there at the top there's still some red ones, you are risk averse. Because now you want the directors and the shareholders to take decisions on stuff that's fairly still small. Okay? And what I've done here, so in my risk appetite that I designed for people, I put it there. I say, there you're within your risk appetite limit, there you've breached it, there you must, so this is a multinational company, so they've got 2 lines of management, regional and international. And you just take this and you break it down into the types of transactions you do in your organization. And when you say here, cater for everything. So if you do something 100 times a day, like processing invoices, then it means 80% of the time you're not going to say once a year because there's going to be 100 of them a year. Okay. Who watched The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? You know. Do you know the story? So people wanted to know what's the purpose of, or the answer to life, the universe, and everything else. So they found a planet, and they built a humongous computer in the planet in a mountain, and they had a whole religion about it, and there were people with long robes praying to this thing for hundreds of years. And eventually, after lots of years, the computer said, yes, I have the answer. So now everybody from the universe comes, and they're going to convene and have a conference for 2 weeks, and the mountain starts shaking, and it says 42. It's like the emperor's clothes almost. So after another week of celebration, somebody says, but what was the question again? What did we want the question for? So they go back to the mountain. Can you just tell us what the question was? Because we sort of lost sight. And the mountain shakes for a week or so, and it says, I don't know, but I can build a computer to get to the question. I think often our risk appetite has got this behind it, because somebody thinks there's a magic number. Let me tell you now, there isn't. There's maybe a number when you're in a banking environment and there's Basel and it says this is your capital adequacy requirements. Yes, then that's one of the things you must do. But that's not your risk appetite, because if you lose your license to operate, even if you have capital in the bank, you're still dead in the water. Okay. So taking the 6 capital, just to show you where it comes in, this you can Google, it's on the Integrated Reporting Council's website. There's the 6 capital: financial, manufactured, intellectual, human, social and relationship, and natural capitals. We take these things from the world. So we take money to buy stuff, to employ people, to make other stuff, or to create services that people must buy. And we spew all of those things out in the world, and then we take it again and we start there. Or other companies must now take what we've spewed into the world and start there. So if you're the mines and you killed 5,000 miners before the court case was even heard, then who must now use what you've spewed out on this side? So if you've got money in the bank and you don't have the people, you've got risk-bearing capacity, the block that we had in the top corner. If you've got everything you need, but you are an insurance company and you're insuring illegal fishing, natural capital is becoming an issue because people will now react to that. Social and relationship capital, that's where governance, compliance, all of that sits. Because if you're not legitimate, remember what we said right in the beginning, people will say, sorry, we're not buying from you. The Nestle and the Greenpeace, go Google that, and you'll see the impact that had. And then all you do, there's your 6 capital. I chose an example of social and relationship capital. And you go and look for the things in your organization. You remember when you have a consequence or impact table, and you sit there and it says IT. 3 days out is red. 1 day out is orange. Half an hour out is green. Nobody knows how you got to that. So think of these things and go and define them in social and relational. If you go onto the website of the Sustainable Development Goals and the IRC, they describe what is in there. And you go build it. For financial, you look at weeks cash in the bank, NOI, all of the normal financial ratios. And then you develop, when does management decide? Sorry, employees decide, when does management decide, local and international, when does the board decide, and when do the shareholder decide? And that's how you build the table that is aligned with your risk appetite. Does it make sense? Remember your delegation of authority also in here. So that will guide you from there to there to there. Then your intuitive risk appetite is aligned to your formal risk appetite. Last 2 slides. Combined assurance. This is just a model that I've got off the web. This was, I think, the Fushini group. Just adjusted it slightly. So where are the governance requirements? Okay. Who must do it? Who checks it? And who's responsible? So as you go down, it's management itself and it's totally independent. And as you go up, more engagement with management. So if you are now the risk function, you can't see yourself as this dude. You have to know that you are there to guide and help. It says assist and guide. So assist means take your hands out and do something about it. Guide is when they're on the wrong track, bring them back. And assurance through monitoring and oversight. Make sure you're not monitoring what the audit guys are monitoring, or what's picked up through control self-assessment. Don't duplicate. So this is an example of what I've built for one company. I took some columns out. So risk-based combined assurance, there's your risks, and a lot of you have seen these types of tables. Understand the residual risk rating. So where are we today? Because the director relies on you to have the controls that you've reported that you have in place to keep that up and going. If one of them is at risk, you will say here in your control effectiveness it's actually weak. Then I know, okay, I need to pay a little bit more attention to that one. Your risk pressure, so despite what you're doing, from outside things have changed. I just read an article yesterday about Ford, when they built the first car. Now, people say Henry Ford said it, but I'm pretty sure he didn't say it. But he says, if I had to play to demand in the market, I would have just given them a faster horse. But because I had a different idea, I thought I could do this. Now, the climate change debate of that time was that by 1940, before Ford, by 1940 there would have been 9 feet of horse manure in the streets of London. So that was their climate risk debate. If the companies in that didn't say, but wait a bit, there's a disruptive technology coming, we would have spent lots of money of fixing the manure problem in the London streets. But we need to understand that disruptive technology might make this problem disappear in any event. How do we then build it into our processes? So you look at your audit outcomes also, and then I've put one here that is an example. Your combined assurance level is usually the lowest of these, because the weakest link, when that breaks, that's the one where you have a problem. And here, I don't put, for instance, what level it is. I put who's actually executing that. So if it's a social and ethics committee, they are accountable and they're only halfway effective. Because people take that as, if you package it as constructive criticism, I as a director know, oh wait a bit, I need to maybe step up my game a little bit here. They don't feel like they're getting anything from me. So that's combined assurance. I think our last slide, no, second last. So this is what the director wants to do with combined assurance. He just wants, not that ugly, but he'll just sit there and he'll say, okay, these guys looks like they have stuff under control. But maybe there's one guy, and I can see in the report, the audit guys are not playing ball here. And I want to be able to activate what I should activate. That's governance and oversight. It's not stepping down and saying, okay, I'll consult to you because I think you need some help here. It's about activating the right areas in the organization. Okay. And then what should you then be able to do to get all of that done? Understand your business. Nowadays, you can't only understand your business. You need to understand the country you're operating in, the region and the world, the industry, all of that. You need to understand your regulatory space. Who does risk-based compliance? I'm sure everybody does risk-based compliance. I'm saying you're on very thin ice. So understand what's core legislation. If you're in IT, you must do GDPR and POPI and everything. But if you get fined or you get a license issue on tax or labor practices, you as risk-bearing capacity is in that space. So understand what's core, what's generic, international policies, trade blocks. You don't want a sanction slap on you. Most people at least got that right, I think, by now. Codes and standards, and then your internal stuff, and I could have added their contractual obligations. Okay? Now here's where the trick comes. I think we're all weak here. Behavioral, personal, and leadership skills. Effective communication and negotiation. Most risk managers had said, oh, okay, I think I can brush up my skills there. And people now try and give training on that. Same with presentation and facilitation skills. Decision-taking theory. Do you understand how people think under pressure and under uncertainty? Probability theory, game theory. And then what motivates people? And it's not often, there's an incentive scheme, so the share price, da, 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 da. It's often what happens at home. I was at a mentoring circle the other day, and what happened is when we started in, we checked in around the table, the one guy said, you know, he's a chairperson of a company, he says, I just need some advice. I need people to help me synergize this. My CEO just stole 80% of our money and he immigrated. And I don't know what to do now. Because I've got 300 people that can't get food tomorrow. So this is maybe something else than we think. So you walk in and you see this guy's face already and he doesn't want to see you there. But maybe just understand what's happening there and understand how people think. And then theoretical knowledge, yes, risk management knowledge, but also understand a bit about statistics and modeling and decision trees and how people get to make decisions. You don't have to be an expert in there, but you need to have the basic knowledge to figure out how it goes. And of course, then you'll just be a genius. Because if you can't do all of that, then maybe you shouldn't be a risk manager. So, final thought. As a director, I assume that you know that if you play the match on Saturday, there will be injuries, which means some players might be out for a few next matches. I assume you know that there could be some yellow cards and we'll get rid of those guys over time, and some people might go be a cold pack player and we'll lose him forever. I assume you know all of that and you've got things in place to deal with that. I want you to tell me about this. Or in more serious language, the terrorist that's going to blow up the stadium. So all the rules, and I think Miles actually made me think about this the first time, because he said the rules of the games are the rules of the game. If you're in this business, you need to know how to operate in that business. That's your standard risks. So if you tell me as a director only those things, I'm like, okay, yeah, well, but I need to understand the rest of the story. So if there's things like, which we didn't know before 1994, like quota players and things like that, tell me before the time so that I can prepare for that. Understand all of these things. And then you will be answering my question and I'll read your report with interest. Otherwise, I'm just expecting you to do what you're supposed to do. Okay. I think that's it. Yeah.
Thanks, Christelle.